Call him Chairman Hawk.
Good morning. Welcome, Chairman Hawk. And all other members and all the folks in the audience. We're happy to have you here with us today. And I would like to call the Finance, Ways and Means Committee to order for Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2024. I hope that everyone has done the proper things for their significant others before they showed up. If not, maybe there's a florist that could still take you somewhere, but I would encourage everybody to make sure that that's covered. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Barrett, Boyd, Camper, Cochran, Crawford, Faison, Freeman, Gant, Garrett, Hawk, Hicks of Hawkins, Hicks of Washington, Kiesling, Lamberth, Love, Lynn, McKenzie, Miller, Moon, Parkinson, Shaw, Sparks, Whitson, Williams, Zachary, Vice Chairman Baum, Chair Lady Hazelwood. Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Before we get started, do we have any personal orders or announcements? Chairman Kiesling.
Thank you, Chair Lady. You have already reminded us that today is Valentine's Day. It's not only Valentine's Day across Nashville, but across our great state. We would be remiss as a committee not to acknowledge this today. With that, we as a committee want to give you our greetings and our thanks for a job well done.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the sentiment, the job well done. We have a long way to go before you can probably, I can claim that, but thank you for the thought. My very own hug-a-bear if things go south today. Representative Freeman.
Thank you. I was going to get you one, but he beat me to it. That's, I'd like to, as a graduate of MTSU, I see Dr. McPhee in the audience, and I'd like to personally thank him for increasing the value of my degree every year. So thank you for all the hard work you do and how much you've done for MTSU. Appreciate it.
Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also have two constituents here in the room. I'd like to welcome David Miller, who's the CFO at UT, and then President Randy Boyd, who's my constituent. I'd like to welcome both of them to the hearing today.
I see no other personal orders or announcements. We do have, as I think is evident from the folks sitting at the table today, our focus is going to be on higher education and their budget. So without objection, we will go out of session and we will begin today's budget hearings. We are, we'll let the folks at the table introduce yourselves, and our order of business that we have is THEC, then Dr. Tidings with TBR, then the LGIs, I think represented by Chancellor Odom, who, you know, is a runaway from Chattanooga. We used to claim him, and then he departed the scene and went on to Tennessee Tech. And then, of course, we have President Boyd representing the UT system. So with that, if Mr. Gentle, if you want to, Director Gentle, if you want to just begin, and we will go through this, and we will, I think we'll hold questions till all the presentations are done. And that way we'll be sure that we won't run out of time for the presentations, and we'll have as much time as possible for questions. So Director Gentle.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Lady Hazelwood, members of the committee, and my colleagues from the institutions and THEC and TSAC who are behind me as well. It's an honor to be here with you today. Happy Valentine's Day to you all. And also, if she's watching, I don't believe she is, happy birthday to my wife as well. It's a big day for us and our family. Today, I'd like to talk to you guys about what we're working on as an agency, where we're going forward right now, take a look back, and then talk about our budget requests that are in front of you today. Right now, what is clear and evident as Representative Freeman said, is the value of higher education, the value of credentials, how they've been increasing over time. What the slide here in front of you shows is just how the jobs have been recession proof for those who have degrees. Over the last two recessions, going back to 2008, the Great Recession and the pandemic as well, the number of jobs added to the Tennessee economy has increased 361,000 for those with bachelor degrees or higher, by 50,000 for those with some college or associate degrees, and they've declined for those who have no more than a high school degree, declining by 90,000 jobs. Higher education is a ticket to prosperity in our families and their communities and in Tennessee. But there's more to that as well. Looking back at what we as a state, the administrations over the last 20 years, General Assembly, THEC, TSAC, and our partners at institutions, we make policy that's not going to change next year. Specifically, we make policies that change decades from now to build the workforce from 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Looking back over the last 20 years, 20 years ago this year, TELS, our lottery scholarship, came into fruition. And since then, we've given out 2 million scholarships to Tennesseans to be able to access higher education more easily. 14 years ago, Complete College Tennessee Act passed, in which we put into place the most aggressive performance-based funding mechanism in the country with the outcomes-based funding formula. And we also put in place Tennessee Transfer Pathways, helping students transfer from one sector to another seamlessly. And I'll come back to that here in a minute as well. In 2014, 10 years ago, Tennessee Promise, building on the success of Tennessee Achieves. I want to thank President Boyd for initiating that 15 years ago. We became the first state in the country to offer tuition-free education to our community colleges and our TCATs. We are the only state in the country that has tuition-free education backed up by an endowment that was built on the fiscal responsibility that this body has had here. And then going back to 2016, 2017, for full implementation, the Focus Act, which gave LGIs their local governance, but also gave Tennessee at the state level control over tuition. And we've seen here over the last 7 years, lowest growths in tuition, primarily because of the appropriations this body has given higher education, the good management by our institutions as well as that tuition policy that we hold here, where we cap undergraduate in-state tuition as low as 0% for a couple of years, but 3 to 4% has been the average. And we see here in this chart the real cost of tuition bending down, controlling for inflation, CPI. Tuition at our community colleges, our TCATs, and our universities have gone down since the Focus Act was put into place. Looking forward, where are we going for the next 20 years, 30 years? First of all, something that's not lost on anyone in this room has been the declining confidence that Americans have in higher education. Going from 2015, 57% having a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in higher education, down to 36%. This is not Tennessee focused, this is the country. Everyone in this room knows. We know from my first slide that higher education is that ticket to success. We have great policies in place to make that affordable, but yet we have more to do. While I am not new to THEC, I've been here for 11 years now, I am new to my executive director position. In my first 90 days, I am wanting to address as much as we can to build up that confidence for Americans, for companies, and for you all as well. Right now, what we've done immediately on our commission meeting just 3 weeks ago is we halved how long it takes for an academic program to go from institution interest to fruition, decreasing that by 50%. We are right now reviewing our capital task force, our capital outlay review process that involves members of the administration, General Assembly, and our institutions to identify how can we better predict the needs and help the needs of institutions in the state across all three grand divisions with the comes of capital. Tomorrow, we are releasing the Governor's Investment in Vocational Education 3.0 RFP. That's $40 million that will go out to our institutions and our local business communities to help build up work-based learning across all of our institutions. I'm excited for that to go out tomorrow. We've already had 55 projects in GIVE come to fruition over the last 5 years. And finally, we are expanding our college access network across the state, focusing right now on building up for the Blue Oval City, who we need to have going into the workforce in that area. Looking forward, though, things that we are tackling right now. Tennessee transfer pathways. I mentioned earlier that came from the Complete College Tennessee Act, where students can transfer seamlessly from community college sector to universities. We have 69 Tennessee transfer pathways, which that's a good thing. Every single one of them, though, has an asterisk or a footnote that says, this pathway won't work for this institution. There's a requirement to change here. Every single one. In total, there are 233 footnotes. We are working to eliminate all of those footnotes from the Tennessee transfer pathways. And in fact, at 8:30, my chief academic officer is convening professionals, over 200 professionals from across the state to address this issue specifically. Going forward, you will not hear me talk about 6-year graduation rates. I'm going to talk about on-time completion rates as an agency, 4-year graduation rates for our university sector, 2-year graduation rates for our community college sector, as a measure of how are we doing by those who are first-time, full-time freshmen, those who start off intending to finish on time, are they able to do so? We have a lot of work to do here in Tennessee. Less than one in two, 50% of our university graduates will complete in 4 years. How can we move that needle upward? I know the universities are working on that as well, but we need to have a state lens on how we can help and support them in doing so. Credentials of value. As mentioned, the increasing values of the degrees that are produced at our institutions. Going forward, we're not going to talk about strict just attainment for the sake of attainment. We're talking about what degrees are they receiving? What credentials are they receiving? Are they stackable? Can you go from one institution to another? Are they employable at a good wage as well? This year, we're working on defining credentials of values with our higher education partners. Dual enrollment has increased significantly due to the investment that this body has given dual enrollment grants over time. We're upwards of $48 million right now going to students in high school to access TCATs, universities, and community colleges in dual enrollment. We have research right now underway to define what is it that we measure by success for dual enrollment and how can we improve that program overall as we have more investments going into it. And finally, what I've heard from everyone, from institutions, from our partners at the commission here as well, is a need for us to better use our data that we have to predict the needs of Tennessee 20 years from now, 30 years from now, not just right now. Where is our workforce going? Where do we want it to go? And how can we help our programs at our institutions meet those needs in the decades to come? Moving on to our agency requests, we have $10.3 million in requests that were not funded in the administration's budget. I'll just go through these very quickly. Right now, we asked for $5.4 million in recurring to sustain and expand our Advised TN program. Advised TN puts counselors, college counselors, in high schools across the state. Right now, we have 30 high schools across the state that are served. These high schools have below average college going rates. With this investment here, we'll be able to sustain and then also expand to more, serve about 10,000 more students at high schools. We have 140 high schools in Tennessee that are below the college going rate average for the state. We like to help them better understand the pathways to college. We have Veterans Reconnect, in which we convene institutions from across the state to better serve veterans. How can we help articulate their skill set coming in from the military into academics? We also have other ways that we help improve veterans. We asked for $500,000 to sustain instead of working on non-recurring, to make that recurring so we continue helping veterans going forward. A non-recurring request for what's called OER, Online Educational Resources, of $3.5 million to produce low to no cost textbooks for students to bend that cost curve down. This is a grant fund request that we have out there. And then last but not least, $885,000 to sustain and recurring our Navigate Reconnect program, in which, like Advised TN, but for adult learners, we help point the way to higher education for adults. This request would help sustain that program. For financial aid, we have a $36 million request. Right now, the federal government's FAFSA, free application for federal student aid, will likely expand who is eligible for Pell, the low income grant that's given out to our students here in Tennessee. We would like to tie recipients of TSAA to Pell. TSAA, Tennessee Student Assistance Award, is our state low income grant. Right now, it's going to families that have about a $35,000 household income. This expansion would help increase that to about $40,000, $45,000 for our students. We did receive the funding for outcomes-based funding formula of $17 million, and for that, we are grateful. There are some other aspects I know that my colleagues are going to speak more to here. With regards to capital outlay, we have one funded project out of the 12 that we requested, $96.4 million for UT Chattanooga. But more importantly is capital maintenance. We requested overall $400 million in capital maintenance. Some of this is going to specific areas like safety and security of $28 million. I know my colleagues will speak more to that. And then general capital maintenance at $250 million. We receive the recurring funding that we get every year, $50 million, which will give every LGI and UT campus a project. And then these are also spread out across the TBR campuses, but the need is greater. I know my colleagues will speak more to that as well. Again, I want to keep my comments short, and I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Director Gentle. And now we'll move to Dr. Tidings. Will talk with us about the Tennessee Board of Regents. Dr. Tidings.
Well, good morning, and thank you for allowing us to be here with you today. As always, I want to start with our mission. It is a very simple and succinct one of student success and workforce development. It's built upon the three pillars that you see here, that of open access, we accept everybody that applies, that of completion, and one of community and workforce development. The year in review, we're very excited about our numbers over this last year. We did have 11,598 associate degrees awarded, 3,000 community college certificates, and 7,677 from our technical colleges. And you see on the bottom that, again, our technical colleges are at 76% completion rate, 86% job placement, and a 95% licensure pass rate. And be reminded that that is any certificate or program that requires licensure in the state of Tennessee. Our students are passing at a 95% rate. This equates to 22,358 degrees, diplomas, and certificates that were awarded this last year. We had a student body this past year of 185,000 students. That is a 4% increase at our community colleges and a 22% increase at our technical colleges. And that does include our continuing education numbers. To talk to you about Blue Oval City, we're so excited to say that we are on time and on budget with this project. Our ribbon cutting is planned for June on this, where we will have be in the building and ready to go for training. This is in conjunction with Ford and with SK Battery Plant. We will be doing all of their training in this facility, and then once their training is complete, we will move on to do other aspects of training in the building for the community as a whole. To address the $1 billion that we were given last year facilities, I'm also very happy to tell you that we are ahead of schedule as to where we thought we would be right now. This encompasses 29 projects. It's the 1.4 million additional square feet and 156 programs that will be impacted. All projects right now have design components already out and established, and we will begin construction on all of these projects during this year with substantial completion by first quarter of 2026. So again, we are moving at lightning speed on this. I know that when we talked about this money, there was a lot of discussion about, can they do it? Will it be able to be built? Just because of the nature of getting everything in line. And I said to you then, we knew what to do. We hired a retired general to make this happen, and it is very much on time and on schedule. I know this is too small for you to read. We have this up in our war room, but what I wanted you to see is this is every one of those projects and where we are with it and the date for the groundbreaking and the ribbon cutting that is well ahead of schedule. All of these projects are being designed with program flexibility, future expansion, and lower maintenance cost than what we previously had. And that's really important for me to point that out, that we are trying to build these for the next 60 years into the future. As many of you know, the buildings that were currently being inhabited by our technical colleges were old, basically high schools built with cinder block, and very difficult to do retrofit on those. So these new buildings, we have built them with the idea that the workforce will continue to evolve, and we've got to evolve with it and be ready to change as the industry demands. I'd also like to talk for a minute about the return on investment that you've made in us in some other areas. One of those is our student success technology. That was 1.5 million that you put into the budget for us in 2023. The initial system-wide implementation for our CRM, our customer relation manager, and our CLR, our comprehensive learning record, will be complete this year. So we are well on schedule for that to happen. And I'd also like to point out that we're working in conjunction with the Department of Labor and the Department of Human Services with our CRM to better utilize their processes to help students that are engaged within their system, so that if a counselor looks at the system on our end, they know what options are available to those students from those two agencies as well. That's an ongoing partnership that we're continuing to grow. Our competency-based education program that we started in 2021, we currently have 110 general education and technical courses that have been converted, and 13 community colleges in 2024 have full CBE programs available. The TCAT capacity expansion, this was money that you gave to us to work our wait list down. 16 million in 2022 allowed us to grow our capacity by adding 74 new faculty members and 76 newer expanded programs, with over 2,100 additional students being added as a result of that. Also, last year, the governor's budget included money for a Trucking Tennessee campaign. Because of the dire shortage of truck drivers within the state, I'm very pleased to tell you that we took capacity from 355 to 930 seats available within our programs. By buying additional trucks and hiring additional instructors, we now can train right out 1,000 students a year to get them on the road in CDL. So a great campaign. And if you haven't seen the trucks or the trailers that we have been taking all over the state, we have an F-250 that is wrapped that carries all of that material to all of the high schools at every one across the state, so that they can see the great opportunity in this field. Executive Director Gentile mentioned dual enrollment and the growth that we've had. Well, since 2015, we've actually had 105% growth in dual enrollment. This has been a tremendous area of growth for us, and our TCATs have been growing the fastest in this area, which means that by the time a student graduates from high school, many of them will have a technical certificate or a diploma in their hand as well. They can go to work from day one when they graduate from high school, if that is the path that they so choose. I'd also like to tell you again this year that we have exceeded the number of workforce training hours from last year. We are right at 1.6 million hours that we did. This is not for-credit students. This is in addition to our for-credit students. That equated to right at 50,589 individuals that came to us for training to upskill in the job that they currently hold. We served 880 companies across the state of Tennessee, providing additional training for their employees to be able to do the job at the highest level. Also wanted to make you aware of something we're going to be doing in April. And I know that many of you are aware that we have advisory committees for each of our technical programs of study. And every year, those advisory committees meet twice a year to discuss curriculum, again, to make sure that what we're training is the appropriate curriculum. But this year, we're also going to have a convening or a charrette in April, where we're wanting to bring in the industries that you see listed here from the field, to have further discussion with them about what they see as important, what their needs are, what is critical to them in the workforce field, and what has changed for them. COVID changed everybody. It changed the way many of us work. And so we know that it's time for us to try to do as much of a level set with these individual groups as possible. So if you have it on your schedule, we're going to make sure that you are all invited if you want to attend and to hear from business and industry across the state. We're going to have this convening at Volunteer State in their gymnasium. We started off planning it at our Sparta campus in Murfreesboro, and decided that we couldn't because we outgrew it very quickly. We knew that we are expecting at least 400 individuals across the state for this convening. I've also talked to you last year about the reimagining of our community colleges. Again, we are constantly looking for ways to be more efficient, more streamlined, and more structured in what we're doing with our students. This is a program that we incentivized 4 colleges with grants last year to look at how they could help students explore career pathways, build career-ready skills, and have stackable credentials. I'm very pleased to tell you that those 4 pilots have been extremely successful, and now we're looking at how we can put that across the entire state in all of our colleges. You'll continue to hear more about that from us. The governor's budget, we're very pleased with what we received in the governor's budget. Thank you for looking at this, and we hope that we'll be able to see that we're funded there. The money for the operating went 4.2 million for community colleges and 1.1 million for our technical colleges, with 11.8 funding of the partial 3% increase on the salary pool for our colleges. In our maintenance area, it's 13,210,000, and that will provide for 6 community college projects, 5 roof replacements, and 1 HVAC replacement, and 1 infrastructure repair. And also, I couldn't end without telling you about our warranty. As all of you have heard me talk about for the past 6 years, we implemented a warranty on our programs, and that it states that if within 1 year of graduation, an employer says you don't have the skills for which we say we've trained you, you know that we will take you back and retrain you for free. To date, we've issued 61,142 warranties, and we still have 0 claims. I'm going to retire before I have to put a number in there. So thank you all very much for listening to us today and for the support that you have given us throughout the year. I know that our legislative aides came and gave you a copy of our report for this last year. So everything I've talked about is in this red book that should be somewhere on your desk in case you want to find out more about us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Tidings. A lot of exciting things going there and across our community college and TCAT system. Next, we have my former constituent and friend, Dr. Odom, who I believe is representing the LGIs today. So, Dr. Odom.
I am. Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. It's an honor to be in front of you today, and happy Valentine's Day to everyone. I'm happy to represent the LGI universities this morning. As I put this slide up to remind everybody where we're located, I will point out that a couple of my distinguished colleagues that have already been mentioned, President McPhee and President Hargrave from Middle Tennessee State and from Memphis, are with us in the audience as well. I will also point out that, as you can see, we're spread across the entire state of Tennessee from Memphis to Johnson City, and so we represent a big part of the higher education sector across the state of Tennessee. We're a little different in the sense that we are not a system. The LGIs, we come before you in this format grouped together, but we are independent operators. We all have our own independent boards, and we all have our unique challenges and opportunities in the areas in which we primarily serve. However, we are a very collaborative group of institutions, and I would point out that really since the Focus Act, I think our level of cooperation has increased substantially. I think you'll be glad to know that. But we're also competitive, and which makes us better individually. So it's worked out quite well, I think, and I appreciate all the support that we've been getting from you as a legislature. So the one thing I'll point out is, and this is primarily my perspective, that I think is very valid, and I think you'll appreciate. We're in a very unique business in higher education, and it is a business because we charge a fee and we provide a service, and I think the students that attend our institutions look on us as a business enterprise, and so we need to operate in a very business-like way. And I think I can speak for all of us that we attempt to do that. We are in this case state-owned businesses, and so we're expected to obviously be nonprofit and to be very well managed. and to provide the value that our constituents and our customers want. It's the only business I'm aware of where the customer and the product are the same thing, and that's the student. They come into our institutions as customers and they leave as the product. And sometimes that puts us, makes us a little schizophrenic in how we approach that set of issues, but it's very important that we strike the right balance. And that right balance is probably never as obvious as it is when we go to creating budgets, because how we resource those efforts becomes very important as we try to balance the costs versus the value that we're providing to those students and future products of our institutions. As has already been indicated, the talent that drives the future of Tennessee comes through our institutions, and we're very proud of that. And we want to keep doing that and do a lot more of it. So I want to thank all of you for your support in helping us get to where we are today. So as far as the 6 locally governed institutions across the state of Tennessee, we account for about 60% of the university total in terms of student enrollment of over 83,000 students as of this last fall. We're producing about 20,000 graduates a year, again, about 60% of the university total. Total economic impact of the LGIs is somewhere north of $8 billion annually to the state of Tennessee. And it's probably one of the best return on investment of anything that you can consider as a legislative body, at about $10 in economic return to the state for every dollar of state investment. So it's pretty substantial investment return. And I don't want you to forget that along with educating students, which is our primary mission, we do a lot of competitive and very important research on our campuses. 5 of the 6 LGI campuses are considered national research universities, accounting for nearly $160 million of competitive research funding collectively annually. So it's a pretty big deal, and particularly when you think about the areas in which we're doing research, areas like rural health and telemedicine, cybersecurity, roads and bridges, electric vehicles, and so on and so forth, things that impact people across the state of Tennessee in their everyday lives. And so the value that we provide is significant, but there's probably nothing I can show you that illustrates the impact more than this photo. This particular photo was taken at a recent career fair on Tennessee Tech's campus. I'm sure a similar type of photo could be shown from any of our campuses across the state. We max out our career fairs every time we open the doors. I think this one had about 200 employers show up to interact and in many cases interview about 1,600 students. And so the demand is great. It shows you the interest that employers across the state of Tennessee have in the graduates that we all produce and the impact that it has. And so I hope that image rings true to you. And again, no greater testament I think can be given to what we produce from our institutions. So in terms of budget, a lot of this has sort of already been hit on. I'll just hit some high points here. Recurring budgets for the LGIs is shown on this particular slide. You can see if you take compared to the governor's proposed budget, the increase for operating expenses from state appropriation, if you take out the salary, it accounts for about a 1% increase over last year. If you throw in the salary pool as recommended in the governor's budget, it's about 2.5% increase. Again, both of which well below the inflationary cost increases that we're all experiencing. So again, it shows what kind of pressure we're in. That the way we have to do our business, which is good, but it's also challenging, and that is as a state-run institution, we have to live within our means, obviously, And so we're not expected to make money, but we're certainly expected to manage what we have effectively as well. And so we're always operating on a pretty thin margin between those two extremes. And I think all of our institutions do a really good job with that. Capital, I'll spend a little time on here. In the governor's capital budget proposal, there's no new outlay projects for any LGI institutions. 3 of the 6 top proposed projects out of THEC were LGI projects. And that's an important piece because it gets to the overall stability and sustainability of our campuses. If you combine that then with the capital maintenance budget, which is pretty minimum, and I think for the LGIs here, it's a total of about $14 million in capital maintenance in the budget, in the governor's proposed budget. That's about 10% of where we need to be to just break even or just stay level with the current level of deferred maintenance on campus. And so we're so far away from scratching the surface of making up any ground on deferred maintenance. It is a significant problem. I'll come back to that in a minute. So that, again, the capital projects that has been recommended from THEC and then out of the governor's budget, only one out of this list is funded in the governor's proposed budget. That's the UTC project. And so it's, again, it goes to the sustainability of all of our campuses. And I think my last slide here kind of brings all this back, and both on operating and on capital budgets, predictability is really important for our campuses. Our ability to predict and manage future costs versus future income allows us to make good decisions earlier on and invest appropriately. So the more, the better we can get ahead of this, the better we can manage and keep those cost increases down for our students. So again, the THEC recommendation for LGIs through the formula is $7.5 million, and we appreciate certainly that support. That doesn't really address the inflationary costs that we're seeing, which I don't have to remind all of you, you're doing the same. The salary pool is much appreciated, but as normal, about 55% of that 3% salary pool is actually funded by the state, which means all of our campuses have to come up with the 45% match in order to make that work, which we always try to do because it's important that our salaries keep pace and in many cases catch up with competitors around the country. And then we're dealing with, as usual, unfunded mandates to the tune of about $16 million a year with the LGIs. Those are tuition discounts for teachers and state employees and dependents, and it's a fairly lengthy list of mandatory discounts that we're required to do. On capital budgets, again, predictability is important. The ability for us to raise matching dollars from private donors is really heavily dependent upon our ability to predict the ability to put forward a project and see it completed. It's hard to get somebody to donate money on a whim that it might happen. And I would say, I don't think we've tracked this, but I would guess over the last few years, where we've had a little more predictability in capital budgets from the state, the amount of private dollars that have come into higher education for capital has been extensive. And so the leverage on the state dollar is pretty substantial here as well. Again, for capital maintenance at the LGIs, we need about $90 million a year for the 6 LGIs just to keep pace with the current level of deferred maintenance. In other words, not lose ground. And so at $13 or $14 million this year, we're way behind the curve. In order to catch up in a decade and to take care of all the deferred maintenance, we need about $140 million a year. The problem with this is it doesn't get any cheaper. You're looking at 10 to 15% cost increases every year. So by putting off deferred maintenance, it just gets more expensive. And so I think we would all stress the need to provide some consideration around deferred maintenance needs on our campuses. It's a great use of money, and it's the cheapest time to do it is now, not later. The last thing I would say around campus safety, it's incredibly important. There's nothing that keeps me up at night more than worrying about campus safety and security. The numbers that we've presented in the past, I think, are still very relevant in terms of the total need. And we need to be able to make sure that we make it as difficult as possible for a bad actor to do something unfortunate on our campuses, and certainly to provide mitigating support for natural disasters and other things as well. So again, thank you for your support. Tennessee is a great place for higher education, and it's a lot due to the leadership out of this legislative body. So I want to thank you for all that you do, and I appreciate your consideration for these things.
Thank you, Dr. Odom, and I know I speak for everyone up here when I tell you that we all appreciate the work that the folks in higher ed do, from THEC, community colleges, TCATs, and to our institutions of higher learning, because the fate of our state, the state of our economy depends on the education of our workforce, and you guys are charged with doing that, and we do appreciate it. Next, we'll hear from President Boyd with regarding UT system. Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Miller, I thought you were asking to be for a question later.
No,
Apologize.
no. I just wanted to recognize the president of University of Memphis, Dr. Bill Hargrave. I didn't see him out there, but I see him now. Thank you. Give him a hand. Thank you.
Now, President Boyd, if you'd like to talk with us about, and we see that even though it's Valentine's Day, you're true to form and you maintain your orange tie. So we appreciate your loyalty.
Thank you, Chair Lady Hazelwood and members of the committee. And actually, I did notice that a lot of my staff was wearing red today, which kind of annoyed me until I realized it is Valentine's Day. So they get one day off from their orange. Oh, you'll be happy to know that I'll be brief and I have no slides. But I do want to start off by just saying thank you. I want to finish or start the way Dr. Oldham finished, to just say thank you for all the hard work you each do to serve the state of Tennessee. All of us work with you sometimes on a daily basis. And I don't think probably 99.9% of Tennesseans know how hard you work. And so I just want to say thank you for all your hard work serving the state of Tennessee. Also, thank you for keeping the state of Tennessee in such physically strong position. I have to remind I had the opportunity to remind my faculty and staff and at my campuses just how fortunate we are to be in the state of Tennessee. Sometimes they might complain about something or the other, but I remember we are so blessed to be in the state of Tennessee and have the kind of financial backing because of the work that you guys do. And finally, thanks for the commitment to higher education. There are very few other states, if any, that support higher education like the state of Tennessee does. So we're just super thankful. So I thought I'd do share two things today. I'm going to do some myth busting. I have 3 myths I'd like to bust, and then I'm going to share 2 challenges. And my challenges will sound a lot like what Dr. Oldham shared, because we did talk. But the three myths, and I need you to help me with these myths, because like me, I'm sure you've been in a lot of meetings in which people actually say these things, and you need to help us combat these myths. The first myth is, and I heard it was in a meeting similar to this, not this one, just last year, in which a member said, well, you don't really need any more buildings in higher education because enrollment in higher education is declining. Well, that's just not true. So help us bust that myth. I spoke of the TBR is increasing. Most of overall, our LGIs are increasing. You can see at the University of Tennessee, we're having record enrollment growth. 4.8% increase in enrollment just last year. This past year, we have 58,726 students, a new record in enrollment. Now, we get enrollment 2 ways. One, you recruit more students in your freshman class, but also another really important and maybe even more important way in which we increase enrollment is by keeping the ones that we get. And so at the University of Tennessee last year, we had an increase of 2.6% in our first-year retention rate to a new record of 85.1%. At Knoxville, it's near 93% first-year retention. So we're doing a much better job of keeping the students that we get. And back to the graduation, not only do we recruit them, keep them, but we're graduating them at all-time record highs. Our 4-year graduation rate last year was a new record across the system at 49.6%, and the 6-year graduation across the system was 64.8%. So first myth, enrollment or in higher education is flat or declining. Not true in the state of Tennessee. And at University of Tennessee specifically, it's growing rapidly. In the last 5 years, over 15% increase. So a lot more students, which our state needs. Second myth, I'm sure like me, you've heard this one many times. Well, higher education is growing, or tuition in higher education is growing faster than inflation. I won't ask for a show of hands, but I know all of you have heard people say that. Again, not true in the state of Tennessee, especially not true at the University of Tennessee. Over the last 5 years, our average tuition increase has only grown by 1% per year, which puts it lower. So that what that means is that tuition today is relatively cheaper than it was 5 years ago. So tuition is cheaper relative than it was 5 years ago, not more expensive. We're not growing at a faster rate. We're also working on making it more affordable for more students across the state of Tennessee. 5 years ago, 2019, we introduced a new program called the UT Promise. When we introduced it, 50% of all Tennesseans could go to any one of our campuses completely free of tuition and fees. This past year, we increased that so that if you make a family income of under $75,000, which just happens to be 2/3 of all Tennesseans, 66.7% of all Tennesseans can now go to the University of Tennessee completely free of tuition and fees. So we're making it more affordable. As a result, last year, 47% of all of our graduates graduated with no debt. That's something that we hear a lot. Well, if you go to the university, you're going to graduate saddled with all this debt. Almost half of our students graduate with no debt, and that was before we introduced the UT Promise. So that's going to make it even more students graduating without debt. Third myth, and the final one, and Dr. Tidings and I agree completely that TCATs are a incredible asset to our state. I love TCATs. I've been to all 27 of them, many of them twice. They do an incredible job to develop the workforce, but I've been in meetings just within the last 6 months, August groups like this, in which people would say, well, the only people that are doing workforce development are the TCATs. And also, that's not true. The universities, our 4-year schools in the state of Tennessee, also produce the workforce that our state needs: accountants, engineers, scientists, nurses, dentists, all those things our state desperately needs. And those are produced at our 4-year institutions. Last year at University of Tennessee, we graduated 13,465 talented individuals that are going to be making, on average, $1.5 million more in their lifetime than if they hadn't gone to college. So we're producing the talent and the talent that our state needs. I thought I'd just give you a few quick examples of the alignment that we have at our campuses. At UT Chattanooga, we've got a great partnership with EPB, the Electric Power Board in that region. The partnership is working toward make Chattanooga the first quantum city in America, and UT Chattanooga will be the first university with a quantum node on the campus. And we're developing new programs around quantum to be able to train the workforce that they're going to need and the country's going to need around quantum. But it's closely aligned with the needs of the workforce there. We also just last fall, Chancellor Engel, myself, and Chancellor Plowman went to Germany for 3 days, working with Volkswagen to make sure that we're aligned with their needs, both around workforce and around research. You go to the middle of the state, UT Southern. If you're in the southern middle part of our state, in every place in our state, we need more nurses and we need more teachers. That's the two key things that UT Southern produces. It's really hard to get a young graduate from Nashville or Chattanooga to move to Giles County or to Wayne County. But if you can recruit them in Wayne County and Giles County and train them there, they're most likely to stay there. So they're providing a critical need there. Our TCATs are doing a great partnership with Blue Oval City, but we're also involved. We've got a really close working relationship at our facility down in Somerville. We have the facility at our campus there is being loaned to Volkswagen to do training. I'll just maybe stop with this. Just say probably the organization or the university that's more closely aligned with workforce needs than any other is the UT Health Science Center. The faculty at the hospital or the doctors at the hospital that are training our students are our faculty, and our students are training in the hospitals and the clinics that they're actually going to go to work for. So it's probably the closest relationship to the workforce that of any university. I'll just close by saying that I think that all this is true for all of our colleagues and that we're aligned with the workforce. So myth number 3, we're heavily involved in developing the talent that our state desperately needs for growth in the future. Close with the 2 challenges, and I'll echo Dr. Oldham in that the current model that we have to fund capital is not working, and we need to come up with a new formula. I'm not here to propose a new way of doing it. I'm just here to say that what we're doing now is not sustainable. At the University of Tennessee, we have 1,016 buildings. 298 of them are over 60 years old, and 60 of them are over 100 years old. And we can't, we have to have some mechanism to replace those buildings, and then also to maintain the buildings that we have. Also, as Dr. Oldham said, our deferred maintenance is too low to maintain the capital that we have. So what we're doing today isn't sustainable. We need to come up with some way of supporting. And finally, challenge 2, also, as Dr. Oldham mentioned, is around safety and security. Last year, this body provided a lot of additional funding for our K through 12 schools, which was desperately needed. We were very thankful in this last special session last fall to get $30 million for higher education. But just for the UT system alone, we've got a backlog of $48 million in needs. This is basic things like lighting, cameras, security on some of our doors. At UT Southern, there's not a single door that has security locks on it now. So these are things that are desperately needing to be addressed. And if something bad happens, and we certainly hope it doesn't, but if something bad happens and you guys call me before you and you say, did you do everything you could to keep your students safe? I'd have to answer, no, we didn't. We have addressable needs. We know them, and we're desperately trying to address them. And we would love to have your support. And with that, I'll close and say we're all eager to hear any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will just note before we get into the questions, there was a lot of information provided by all of you, a lot of it incredibly interesting, and I know we want to delve down onto, but one of the things I just want to highlight is something that President Boyd, maybe because I heard him last, I remember it better, but the fact that you have a retention rate of the UT system of 85% from freshman year to sophomore year, and at the UTK campus, that was 93. You know, those are incredible numbers. I mean, I don't know about you all, but when I went to college, if there were half of the people in your sophomore class that had been your freshman class, that was pretty, a pretty good retention rate. So having numbers that high means that the universities, we're doing something right in Tennessee, keeping, and I think that means that young people are not only having a good experience on the campus, but they're also recognizing the value that experience is going to have, and they're willing to continue to work toward it. So, the 7% who partied too hard, they happily will be able to come back at a later date or re-engage at another institution. But again, I just want to congratulate all of you for that kind of retention rate, because that's a number I don't think we would have believed a few years ago if somebody had told us that was on the horizon. So with that, Chairman Williams, you're first on my list.
There you go.
Hello, my name is Ryan Williams. Yeah, I'm still kind of new to this whole thing, but just wanted to say thanks to each of you. You're doing a fantastic job. It's great to see not only that you're all going or trying to achieve and setting this very similar goals, but you're all going about it in a completely different way. And I think that's what makes our higher education system very unique, because there's a place and a seat at the table for all of our students, regardless of their need or what their desires to do in the future are. But I did want to start with you, Director Gentile. I did notice something different in the budget this year that we hadn't seen before, and it had to do with rural healthcare pathways. the governor set aside, it looks like a 4-year commitment, a little over $67 million. The first of that tranche of money this year, I think, is like $15 million. This is new to us, or to me particularly, and I just wondered if you could kind of give us a brief overview of what that looks like. Obviously, one of the things you guys do better than anybody is data and being able to understand and know that. So I'm thankful that it's in your wheelhouse. Just like to know a little bit more about what that is and how you see those changing outcomes. Is it, if you could answer that, that'd be great.
Thank you, Chairman Williams, Representative Williams. Yes, sir. There was $15 million going to higher education specifically to develop transfer pathways, pathway programs for healthcare. This came out from the Rural Health Task Force that convened last year. And from that task force, there were a number of recommendations, 2 that hit higher education specifically with regards to developing these programs. 1, to go to TBR to develop programs between community colleges and TCATs, those nursing program pathways. And I know Chancellor Tidings can speak more to that than I can. Another was what we've seen already between MTSU and Meharry, or TSU and Meharry, as well as others, are those BA to MD programs. Those are 2 separate recommendations. And my understanding is that these were combined into one $15 million to come to us. What I'm excited about these programs is that we do have, as we know, a rural nursing shortage healthcare across the state. However, if you look at the top programs, producing programs from our TCATs to universities to community colleges and our graduate programs, nursing is one of the most popular out there. So we know that the demand is there, and we know that we have the opportunity to provide that education. How can we link those across all those sectors so that one student, as I mentioned in my presentation, can stack credentials from one to the next? We'll be developing that process to distribute that money in coordination with the administration as well as the institutions in the coming months.
Yep. Thank you for that description. Sounds very exciting. I guess one of the challenges that we have in any department across the state is we have this fantastic idea. We think we're going to go forward, and it takes 14 months to stand it up and really begin to implement the change. How long do you think it would take for your department and your partners to be able to stand this program up for pathways, and so that we could actually see it move the needle in our rural communities?
Yes, sir. Well, I can speak to as far as once the program is proposed and what those look like. With regards to the university specifically, which we have approval authority over for those programs, the most recent action that we took as a commission was to have to as little as 90 days to 6 months for a program to be stood up. We've heard from about a year in the past. Now, immediately is down to 90 days to 6 months. So that is our proposal. But then again, developing the RFP to send out to the campuses to develop those programs, that takes a lot of legwork on their end. I know they're primed and ready to go for it. But as soon as they send those to us, we'll respond accordingly to it.
One final question. As a part of standing that program up, have you begun to discuss how to measure outcomes to make and to ensure the investment is really returning healthcare professionals to rurals? Have there been any discussion about that, or if there has, what would an example that might be?
I would like actually to defer to Chancellor Tidings on that specifically, as you have a hand on task force.
Yes, thank you for the question. Dr. Reed from our Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs actually served on the task force that helped develop this. And so for TBR, the money that's been put into the budget for that is actually for programs that we already have in existence. It's our nursing programs, and then the articulation of those programs over to the community colleges as well. What we saw during COVID is we had a decline in people that wanted to go into nursing. For the first time ever, I had a nursing program that had to shut down, and that's almost an unheard of thing to talk about. They didn't have enough people that wanted to go into it. So in the rural areas, what we're going to be doing is specifically trying to recruit more people into the areas of nursing and then articulate them through in a more expeditious manner to get them to go to work immediately. We've also created more pathways immediately with those rural hospitals so that they'll be ready to go to work. So the time frame for us is as quickly as we can get the money.
Well, thank you for answering the questions. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Dr. Oldham and his staff for being here, since they are my constituents, and very happy to have them here, and Dr. Saltzman as well. But I couldn't help but see my other constituent entered the back of the room. I call her the Queen Mom. Her name is Dr. Clary Stinson. She manages all the money over at Tech, and she grabs me by the ear still today. So I hope you'll make them all welcome. Thank you.
Chairman Williams spoke to an issue I think that we'll all be interested in. And I know it's early days in tracking that, but I think one of the key things, we can set up these pathways, but one of the key outcome measurements is going to have to be how many of those people actually complete the program, number one, and then stay in the rural areas, which is, where this need, not that we don't need nurses and teachers across the state, but, there's certainly a more dire need in those rural areas. So I think helping, having you all give us input on what we can do to make sure that not only we attract these folks into the fields, but we find a way to keep them in those, more rural counties and areas. Next on my list, Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady, and it's great to see all y'all today. Appreciate y'all coming out. And so, Director Gentile or anybody that wants to speak to this, there have been some significant delays with FAFSA because of some functional updates and just eligibility changes. But with the Tennessee Promise, you have to apply for that first. How has that affected the number of people or the delays in getting the Tennessee Promise, and how are y'all working around that?
Yes, sir, Representative Boyd. We anticipated that there will be problems with the rollout of the new FAFSA. That's not in our control. That's in the federal government. We anticipated that as early as summer of last year, and we started to anticipate and plan for it. What we did with Tennessee Promise, first of all, we did have the deadline in the fall for Tennessee Promise, and the applications broke another record for Tennessee Promise, which we're really excited for. So the demand is there. However, the recent rollout of the FAFSA, we immediately changed our deadline for the FAFSA completion for Promise students to May instead of the March deadline that was in place, anticipating that this might be a problem with rollout. And so we have communicated with Tennessee Chiefs and AIRS, and I know they're communicating with their students, and these are our partnering organizations on what's coming down the pike. We also know this, and that is we received update from the federal government 2 weeks ago that said the data behind the FAFSA will not be to our institutions until mid-March, which means essentially institutions will not be able to package financial aid until March, which is quite delayed from where it has been in the past. We put out a press release so that we can get out there for all of our partners and all adults who are applying for financial aid and students in high school, just to broadcast, don't worry, the aid is there. It will come. And I know our institutions are standing ready as well. I want to defer to my colleagues to see if anyone has anything else to say to that.
I'm good, Madam Chair Lady. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Lady Hazelwood. And before I ask my questions, I just want to recognize two folks. I was a brand new member to the General Assembly in 2017. I couldn't spell ECD or TBR, and I just will never forget these two individuals came to my office as a freshman legislator and reach out to me. And I just thought the leadership that y'all showed was just absolutely amazing. And I just want to tell you how much I appreciate that as a new legislator. And I'll never forget it. And Chancellor Tidy, I appreciate so much what you did to help us with mechatronics at Fairview and Columbia State at the Franklin campus. And President Boyd, you've always been great, receptive. And I'll never forget Senator Steve Dickerson. I helped you get into the new role by making sure you had a copy of the movie Animal House. Okay. So
Yes.
so, great training. But anyway, in keeping with Chair Lady Hazelwood's talk about pathways and stuff, question I had talks about, and Director Gentile, this is for you, sir. Tennessee Future Teacher Scholarships. Could you give us an update on that? It was a 5-year pilot program that we approved, and just would like to know, have you started receiving applications for these scholarships? And if so, how many have you received and have been eligible to date for that?
Yes, sir. Thank you. And I'll need to follow back up with you immediately with those numbers. I don't have them on top of my mind right now, so I'll do that. But this was the first year of the rollout of that program, in which students will be able to receive scholarship on their way to being a teacher. And we did get applicants this year for it, but I'll follow up with you about the number of them.
Okay, great. And Chair Lady, I know Chairman Keesley was able to leave, and he asked me to do his
Yeah,
question. Can I go ahead and do that, ma'am?
Certainly. And Director Gentile, if you will just get those numbers to my office, then we'll share them with the committee as a whole. There's probably a lot of interest, again, because there's such a shortage of teachers in every one of our districts across the state. So Chairman Whitson, please continue.
Oh, yes, and this has to do with the Drive to 55. I know we touched on it briefly, but the Drive to 55 had a goal of increasing the number of Tennesseans with a post-secondary degree or certificate to 55% by 2025. Can you give us an update on those numbers? And is the plan to continue this after 2025, sir?
Thank you, sir. The numbers actually were released just 2 weeks ago. It's about 49% where we are on our way to Drive to 55. Will we reach 55% by 2025? The likelihood is not strong. And the reason why for that is the pandemic did hit a lot of our momentum on the way to that. Will we continue an attention on an attainment goal like the Drive to 55? That's what we're figuring out this year, is what is that next goal? As I said in my presentation, I don't see attainment for the sake of attainment as the answer. It's an attainment of what credentials specifically, and how that's impacting the livelihoods of Tennesseans and the workforce. But yes, we are working on our strategic plan over the next year, and Chair Lady Hazelwood sits on the committee for that strategic plan reimagining that will be kicking off here in the coming months. Is it an attainment goal for attainment's sake? It's going to have more information about credentials of value in it, sir.
Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thank you guys for your leadership. Thank you for being here. Madam Chair, if I may, I've got my question here, but hopefully I'll get to that in just a second. But I've got a comment and then some questions. So, Director, I believe it was one of the first slides you showed. It talked about, and forgive me, I may be off just a little bit, but it showed during the pandemic, those with a 4-year degree, how they sustained employment and actually thrived versus those who didn't have a degree. And so I think the value of higher ed, and I know for my district in particular, the value of higher ed, we've probably never had a time where that is more important. And because of the specialty, even of TCATs, but also, as President Boyd talked about, accountants, doctors, so many needs, psychiatrists, so many needs in our state. And frankly, when you look at the budget, I've got so many notes here versus going through my notes. Frankly, when you look at the budget, it is concerning and frankly unacceptable what the governor has proposed in his budget to support higher ed. That's probably not the most popular thing to say, but when I look at this through a private sector lens, and if I'm looking at it, obviously I ran a very small business with small numbers, nothing compared to what we're talking about here. But when you talk about capital maintenance, for capital maintenance, you guys as a whole need $547 million. 49 million is proposed. If we look at that in the private sector, and there are other people that could speak to that much better than me that run much larger organizations, that's crippling years down the road. And that's going to cost significantly more just 2 years from now. And I think just the University of Tennessee, the need for the chemistry building. I've been in that chemistry building. Dave Wright, who is one of our senior members in the Republican caucus, had classes in that building. The building is falling apart. I think just a couple of years ago, the costs were $120 million. Now it's $165. There's been no funding appropriated to that. And so a couple of years from now, it's going to be $200 million. And I'm sure Dr. Oldham, Dr. McPhee, we could go on and on and on. And I think it's just important to remind this committee, this is just a proposed budget from the governor, but this is our budget. And I cannot accept the fact that the investment needed in higher ed is significant. And I think it was you, Dr. Oldham, talked about 10% is what we're appropriating for the LGIs for capital maintenance. That's just capital maintenance. We could go into capital projects on and on. Members committee, this is something we have to address, and we have to look at this budget differently than what has been proposed. Because again, frankly, what has been proposed is completely unacceptable. And I've expressed these concerns to Chair Lady Hazelwood, Chairman Williams, Chairman Hicks, with Leader Lamberth. And so I'm just very concerned as we continue to keep up with a rapidly growing economy. My question to ask you was about cybersecurity. In order to keep up with the threats that continue to come from China and around the world, we need to have the best and the brightest to be able to be educated. And we're not equipping you guys with what you need to be able to continue that. And so again, just to me, it's completely unacceptable. And so I just thank you for your leadership through this. We know we hear you. And again, sometimes we get up here and we ask questions, and all these questions are important, but the funding is woefully inadequate. And out of a $52.6 billion budget, we can't find a few $100 million for capital maintenance, a few $100 million for capital projects, and to equip you guys with what you need. I mean, again, we've got up here ETSU, we've got Memphis, Tennessee Tech, so many schools, TSU. I see you down there. You looked at me. We've got so many schools. We've got, sorry, I saw you. We got so many schools represented. And I think we all have the same passion. And just, I think you need to know we hear you. And again, this is our budget, and what has before you has just been proposed by the executive branch. And those of us who are closest to the people, I feel like we'll see some changes. You know what? I'll skip my cybersecurity question because it just feels anticlimactic to ask that now, Madam Chair. So thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Zachary. And I think the chairman brings up a good point for all members and for those of our colleagues who may or may not be watching. But this is a proposed budget, and the purpose of these hearings is to hear about the proposed budget, but also to hear about whatever needs may not have been included in the budget, so that we can make good decisions about potential changes that we might view as necessary for the betterment of this budget going forward. So again, this is a document in process. We're not looking at the finished product here. Not to say that unless Chairman Zachary has a secret stash that I'm unaware of, I'm not sure that we have a few billion laying around to just cure all the problems, but we certainly do have the responsibility as a committee to look at the allocation of funds and to just look at the priorities and make sure that the priorities reflected in the budget also reflect the priorities of the legislature and not just the administrative branch. So, that's why we're here. Next on my list, Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. And thank you all for being here. Truly appreciate everything that you're doing. Director, you mentioned preparation for a Blue Oval City. Can you share a little bit more detail about what we're doing to prepare for Blue Oval City?
Yes, sir, Representative Parkinson. I can, from TSAC's perspective, on the role that we've been playing. Although I know our partners here, especially Chancellor Tidings, with the actual TCAT that's being built there, can go more into detail on it. We have been engaged with the administration and those who are focused from all different agencies, and that includes TBR, and that includes labor, that includes ECD, and many other partners on what are the needs of the Blue Oval City right now. What we've identified from our perspective, I mentioned Navigate Reconnect and helping adult learners navigate to a TCAT or a university or community college, and advising high school students to get into programs. We have focused two of our resources there, specifically from those two bodies in the HTL, those 3 counties right outside of Memphis, to help them and navigate those students and adult learners and high school students on their way to a TCAT, community college or university, that then funnels into the Blue Oval campus. That's what we're working on from our perspective right now. We are also working with our higher education partners from universities, TBR, and our LGIs on identifying the number of students that we are producing in those programs that would directly feed into the needed areas, and providing a dashboard. I know TBR has been leading on that front, but we're siphoning university data into that as well to better predict, are we prepared, are we ready as a workforce to meet the demand in Blue Oval City?
And Madam Chair Lady. Okay, thank you. And how are we looking on the timeline for that preparation?
I'm going to turn to Chancellor Tidings for
Sure.
that, please.
We have been working diligently for over 2 years with Ford and with SK. And so we've got curriculum developed. Equipment has been ordered. We're ready to go. The building will be opened in June. So we've actually started training individuals at other locations prior to that. We've been working very closely with the K-12 system to make sure that students and parents understand the pathway for students and what it would take. The EV component of the training, we were already doing some of that across the state. We've amplified what we're doing in West Tennessee with regard to EV, but we've also standardized that EV training across the state of Tennessee. And while Blue Oval City is huge, and that's the big one for West Tennessee, we also recognize that we have Chattanooga Volkswagen, we have Nissan that's going EV, we've got the GM plant that's also going EV. So we are training individuals all across the state of Tennessee for that. We did develop a dashboard, and so we are looking at the calculations every day. Again, we can get those figures to you, but we know what we have output right now, and we know what we're going to need to continue to help them be successful. We meet with Ford. It was 3 times a week. We're down to once a week now, to making sure that everything is going smoothly with them. We've been to Michigan on many occasions, again, to make sure that we're replicating and doing exactly what it is that they need for us to do.
Okay, and thank you. And Chancellor Tidings, if you will, after we meet, if I can get some type of a list to see where this EV training and these items are taking place, that would be very helpful. One last question, Madam Chair Lady, to our friends, with LGIs, or any of you, as a matter of fact, is there any pathway to provide a free university experience to all that are interested in going to a 4-year university in Tennessee?
I think the answer to that would be yes. There is a way to do it. We just have to, and I think President Boyd probably has shown that it is possible. We have to get pretty creative and find sufficient partnerships to offset those costs. But yeah, it certainly is feasible to consider that, and I think that'd be a very laudable goal.
President Boyd, your name was called.
Yeah, well, I'll thank Representative Parkinson. So the students that get a Hope Scholarship and are fully eligible for Pell, those 2 things alone will cover the tuition for most of our universities in the state. So when we talk about the UT Promise, it actually turns out not to cost us nearly as much as one would think. We're also in the process of raising an endowment. We're about $34 million into a $100 million endowment. So between the endowment, Pell, and Hope, it actually is very, very inexpensive.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And just sort of an aside, or back to an issue that we talked about, and I guess, Dr. Tidings, this would be for you. We are putting $1 billion investing in to TCATS, and we saw the growth in the enrollment in TCATS, a smaller growth in community colleges, but a significant growth in TCATS. How do you see that pipeline as these buildings and programs come online? Are we going to have students to fill those seats, or how is that pipeline looking?
The pipeline looks good, and that thank you for asking that question. When you gave us the wait list money several years ago, we had a wait list of over 11,000 students. We reduced that wait list down in the first year to over 6,000, and we've reduced it down now by an additional, we're taking 4,000 students off that wait list every year. And people say, well, hadn't the wait list gone away? And I say, no, we're really hoping it doesn't, because we want to continue to have that pipeline as these new buildings come on board, so that we can continue to serve them in those new facilities. We'll be able to increase the capacity and use those wait lists to fill those students up.
Yes, the other issue will be making sure that you might have a building in this location and excess students in another. So, working through that logistical challenge as well.
Yes, ma'am. And most of that was planned for in the ask for the buildings themselves. All of that was based on our strategic master plan, which was done with a study across the state of where the populations resided and where we needed to.
All right, well, we'll look forward to determining how accurate our study turned out to be. Right. Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And much like the chairman of Calendar and Rules, I've been tasked to ask about cybersecurity, but I'm going to go down a different path and make a few statements at first. I was fortunate to chair the higher ed subcommittee in 2009, 2010, when we were tasked with finding a funding formula that actually worked for the state of Tennessee. Previously, we had funded enrollment as the deciding factor in how higher ed got their dollars. And now we've gone to a completion model that has been the envy of the rest of the country, truly. And I remember sitting at a meeting in the Tennessee Tower saying, how can we do this? And the folks that embrace that idea have, it's paid dividends numerous times over, as we're now encouraging completion of degrees to get folks in and out of our institutions that you represent. So I want to thank you for embracing that and being a part of that. I do want to talk a little bit about cybersecurity and being the father of a young lady in higher ed and the father of a 12-year-old who thinks she should be in higher ed. I want to talk about cybersecurity and how we're not only keeping our employees safe, but also our students, and what THEC is doing. I know that you requested some dollars, again, as we've talked about before, that may not be included in the governor's budget, but some opportunities to fund some cybersecurity issues for all of our institutions across the state. If you could address that, Director Gillette.
Yeah, Representative Hawk, thank you for that question. And I'm going to do another pivot to Chancellor Tidings here in a second. I'll tell you why. We have, from our perspective, run into concerns with cybersecurity when it comes to our financial aid data that goes to institutions and having cyber attacks on institutions in which we have to completely shut off access to financial aid for those institutions. We have had issues with being able to share data with our institutions for research purposes and partnerships because it doesn't meet the state standards for cybersecurity that's at our institutions. We were approached by Chancellor Tidings and TBR for a specialized request for their institutions for cybersecurity, and we actually we thought that was a good idea. We pulled all of our campuses to ascertain exactly what that number should be to meet the needs of all campuses. But because Chancellor Tidings was the one who came to us first from institutions, is it okay if I ask you to speak to it?
Absolutely. And as you are all aware, it's critical. We've had 2 colleges that had major incidents, and it is a devastating setback when this happens. One was Christmas a year ago when it happened. What it takes to recover that data, to recreate what we have on the campus, is a massive amount of time and investment. We have to pull in areas of specialty to do that. And so we realized when the first one happened, we were able to go in and look at where we had some weaknesses. We were able to shore those up. So when the second one occurred, it was not as bad, but what it did was give us the knowledge and understanding of what we were lacking. And that was the request that we took to THEC to help us with that. It is so much better to be preventive than to have these bad actors get in. And of course, every time we shore something up, they're figuring out another way around it. So it is a constant vigilance that we have to be aware of. But it is the age in which we live. It is something that we have to continue to look at and continue to work on. And it is very expensive and costly to do this, not just in the dollars amount, but the man hours that have to be put in to make sure that we are shoring that up.
Chairman Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. And this question is for all of you. Probably President Boyd can answer some of this because I know it affects UT. But during the special session last year, we proposed $30 million to make the safety grants for you guys to be reimbursed on progress that you all made. How is that $30 million been as far as making a dent into the situation? And have you all started seeking reimbursement yet?
So Representative Crawford, I'll start and then tag my colleagues. But of the 30 million, the UT system got awarded 6.3 million. We've already received funds. We're already have a plan to allocate those. I last June toured all of our campuses. We had a very detailed inventory of each campus's needs. So fortunately, we had a ready list of $48 million that we needed to invest right away. So we put the $6 million that we got into the most urgent needs, like 4.2 or 3 million went to UT Southern because they had the most dire situation. But the short answer is we've got the funds, we've already deployed, and we're making investments now. Chancellor Tidings?
out of the dollars, we received 7 million, which again helped us to go in and secure doors, do all of the things that we need to do on the campus. But one other additional item that we were able to do in the budget that was in the budget last year is we partnered with the Department of Homeland Security. And they put 2.5 million in the budget that they were successful in getting for us to buy radios that go out on all of our campuses. And as you know, many of our technical colleges are remote. They're out in an area where there are not a lot of people around them, but we are now tied in directly to the system with Homeland Security, and we'll have access to the same radio frequencies that they have. So that was a huge improvement for us. To say that there is more to be done is an understatement.
Madam Chair Lady, that kind of answered my second question. I was wanting to know if there was any partnerships or if there was any other funds out there, such as like your plant fund. Can you use that toward the security upgrades?
Yes, sir, we do. And in all of the new buildings that we have at TBR, all of those 29 projects have the best security upgrades in them. So that's another reason why this is such a critical building process for us.
And I'm making an assumption, which is dangerous, but when you all talk about the deferred maintenance requirements on, all of these campuses, I'm going to assume that that did not include security upgrades, that was the more traditional types of maintenance that you were talking about.
Yes, that's true.
All right, thank you. Representative Love.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will take direction from my two colleagues and make a statement before I ask a question. Let me thank the committee for your commitment with the past funding issues with Tennessee State University. Also, let me thank Dr. Boyd for your commitment to elevate the conversation about our two land grants being viewed in the same vein and being both viewed as valuable and worth investing in. I had a question to Dr. Odom about the slide dealing with the recurring only for the LGIs. There is a section that says outcomes adjustments. And the question I want to ask is there a reduction for an appropriation? Is that based upon graduation rates, or what produces that amount right there?
Yeah, so those are adjustments that are made based on the funding formula, the various metrics within the formula, which the bulk of that is, it's not really graduation rate plays into it, but it's total number of graduates is probably the most dominant factor in that calculation. But in sum, all of those criteria go into the formula, and those dollars get distributed then through the THEC formula, as has been already indicated. And I will point out, while I'm on this, if you go back to 2010, the progress we've all made in terms of graduation rates and retention rates is directly attributable to that funding formula. There's no question about it. So it has done exactly what was intended, I think, in that regard. But those adjustments that you see reflected on that slide are those annual adjustments up or down based on the relative performance of each institution.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, one more if I could. Thank you. And speaking to the rural healthcare pathway, I would like to lift up, I think it was raised already, Meharry has a wonderful program with MTSU, getting students to go from MTSU to Meharry. Tennessee State has one also called the Dr. Levi Watkins Institute. And just from a perspective of what Meharry does, 43% of the dental students are Tennessee residents, and 38% of the medical students are Tennessee residents. And that's outside of the programs with these schools, but that's just what Meharry does. And so there's a great model to build upon right there to educate students who are Tennesseans. You made the point about recruiting students from Giles County to be nurses, same program. If we can recruit more Tennesseans to go to our schools in these pathways, it's easier to retain them in these areas. So I just want to lift that up as we're talking about the fast way to stand up these programs, that Meharry has a wonderful program with 2 of the institutions already. And I'm sure, I'm not speaking for them, but they're in the district that I represent. So let me go ahead. I'm sure they would love to work with any other colleges in Tennessee to also expand their work in that area. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, Representative Love. I'm sure that they'll take that commercial message into under advisement. Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here. One thing I've noticed as we meet with you all and your staff and is y'all's passion, right, for what you all do. And I just want to know that we all appreciate that, because not only do we see your passion, but we see your staff's passion, we see your professors' passion, and that is something that starts at the top. So we just really appreciate the passion you all have for our upper education folks, because it is noticed, and we do appreciate that. So I just wanted to make those comments before I get to my question. My question revolves around the enterprise resource planning system. Can one of you tell me what that is? So those that are listening may not have a clue what it is before I'll get to my specific question. So if one of you could let me know what that is, and then I'll have a couple questions to follow up with that, please.
I'll make a quick attempt at it, and my colleagues can step in. But I know my CFO is in the back, and he can tell you point by point what's involved. But I think maybe the most important thing to know about the ERP system, or Enterprise Resource Planning System, is that for the first time in the state's history, and maybe for the first time in the history of any state, every one of the LGIs and the UT campuses work together. And thanks to the General Assembly for funding that program. But I think it's unprecedented that we're all working together so closely. I think it's emblematic of our relationship today. But at the UT system, I'm told daily, because I asked daily from our CFO, David Miller, who's behind me, that at the UT system, we're going to be rolling out our enterprise resource system on July 1 of this year. And what this does is provides all the background, or all the back office work for human resources, purchasing, all the operational things that need to help, or we need to help run our organization. And it's not something that's a nice to have, it's a must have. You've got to have some type of IT system to run these functions, and the function of the systems that we had before are being obsoleted, and it's all moving to the cloud, which is also provides additional help around the cybersecurity side. Not perfect, but it does make it more secure. That helps a little bit.
That's perfect. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
if I could add just one thing, and I don't want to oversimplify this, but it's not the brain behind how we do things, but it's the central nervous system, and it's how all the information flows, particularly on in this case on the business side, and so it makes us ultimately a lot more efficient at what we do.
It's good.
Great. Well, thank you for that. Will provide some color to the question I have regarding that, so we'll understand what the ERP system is. But so in fiscal year 2023, I think there was $170 million that was budgeted for this particular program. And I believe right now we're showing at least as of June 30th, there's $100 million that remains unspent. And so my question revolves around that, is that can you provide the status of it, an update for the UT system and the LGIs? And then have there been any roadblocks to implementing the particular system? And then when do you expect it to be complete between the LGIs and UT? So if you kind of expand on some of that, since we have some cash sitting there, that would be important for us to know.
For the UT system, will be fully implemented July 1. We're on time and on budget.
Good deal. Plain and simple.
Yeah, and as far as the LGIs, I'm not familiar with every campus since we're doing this independently, but ETSU, I believe, is going to be the first full implementation. And I think they're on the same schedule as the UT campuses, and I think they plan to be fully implemented by July 1. Tech is, I think, next out of the chute, and we're 12 to 18 months away from full implementation at this point right now. And I got colleagues here that could probably address what Midland, Memphis, or where they are, but that somewhere in the mix.
Okay, good deal. And then a couple more comments, Madam Chair. Finally, I've got a freshman at UT, and he will be hopefully a rising sophomore here real soon. And
one of those retention numbers.
And let's hope so. And housing tends to be, a challenge, and I would assume that's a challenge across our systems, right? And so I just was curious if student housing has been a bottleneck for any of you all for recruitment purposes, and not only recruitment but also retainage, right, for students that want to stay. So if you could address some of those needs as well, I'd appreciate that. And I've got one final comment after that.
Yeah, I think we could all probably address that. I'll start just simply to say, yes, it is a bottleneck, and it's something that we're addressing. And one of the things that we're really happy about is that this year we got approval, or last year, for the first ever in the state's history, a P3, a public-private partnership, where we can solicit someone from the outside to help us speed building new housing. And with this particular project, we're building 1,900 new beds that'll be online by the fall of 2025 and roughly another 900 by the fall of 2026. We think this is a really great model to elicit the private sector to help us speed new buildings. Roughly, they're investing over $400 million, $420 million in these three buildings. The state, the university is not putting any capital forward. Will be positive cash flow on year one. With the managing the dorms, the students will have the same experience that they would otherwise. And 35 years from now, it all reverts back to us. It's a great model. It's something that I'm hopeful that we can expand on across the state.
Yeah, I think that all the LGIs would probably echo the same thing, and we're anxious to see success on the P3 front as well, because I think that's the way we can address this the most effectively and quickly long term. In our case at Tennessee Tech, we need more student housing, and I just can't build it fast enough. And so this is really critical, and I'm sure all the other campuses are the same way.
Well, I'm sure that the needs with the recruitment, with folks that are coming in, I can see those challenges. In my final comment, I want to echo Chairman Zachary's comments from some of the stuff. Even Representative Freeman and I were talking about these capital outlays. I think when I was at UT, I say 25 years ago now, I think the chemistry building was in disrepair at that time, and I understand that was one of your main focuses of this year's budget to either replace or fully give that building a pretty significant facelift. And when you have as many buildings as you have at UT, with 298 buildings over 60 years old, I mean, that does, the more that we defer capital for these buildings, the worse off we can get for all of your buildings that need this particular attention. So I wanted to echo Chairman Zachary's comments that we need to pay attention to how we're building and keeping these buildings for folks to continue to come to our institutions. And we've got to be on the forefront of that technology to show off those campuses. That is your marketing wing, so to speak, of what our buildings look like. So I hope we can revisit that to make sure some of your capital projects are met. So we appreciate you all being here and telling us your needs and what we need to continue to support you in what you are doing. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, thank you.
You're welcome. Chairman Baum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to start by thanking you all for your hard work and your leadership for higher education and for being so innovative. I share the concerns about the insufficient funding for maintenance projects. We're behind, and if we don't provide more funding for deferred maintenance, we're going to fall further behind. I think this committee is also aware that in the past we've been able to approve funding for more than just one new capital building. And this budget just includes one. So we might want to keep in mind that in the past, we've been able to fund more than that. And that doesn't even get into residence halls, which Chairman Garrett brought up just a moment ago. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that. How short are we on beds in residence halls for our student populations, particularly the way they've been growing?
Well, it's going to vary probably considerably based on the campus. Tennessee Tech is probably pretty typical in that regard. We house roughly 25% of our undergraduate student body on campus currently. And so, as I said, I can't build new beds quickly enough. We probably have a need for 400 more right now. And to start a project and get it done is 2 to 3 years easily. And that could probably be echoed on all our campuses. Of course, just to make sure everybody understands, the state doesn't provide any money for student housing. And so these projects are all self-funded. And so campuses are put in the position of being our own real estate developer, as it were. And so back to the public-private partnership opportunity, that would give us an additional tool in the toolbox to be able to address some of this most efficiently and quickly, as opposed to the more traditional state process. But at the same time, like any developer, you have to look at a pro forma and make sure it makes sense, and you can provide a housing option for students that's acceptable at a reasonable cost, and that's going to vary a lot depending on location.
And you mentioned P3s. UT has one. MTSU is working on one. What sources of external funding are you able to attract for those kinds of projects?
So I will say with our project, it was highly competitive. There were a lot of companies that bid on the project, and so it was very attractive. Now, one of the things that UT Knoxville has the benefit of is a tremendous amount of demand. So this past year we had over 61,000 students apply for 6,700 spots. So as the investor, they know that there's going to be way more demand for the beds than we'll have enough of supply of. So I think when they're looking at each campus, it'll depend on the demand for the beds. But I think I would hope I could speak for my colleagues, but I think that you'll find that there's enough demand in all the campuses to get a lot of interest.
Okay.
Representative Baum, we have a spreadsheet that we collected back in the fall that shows occupancy rates by campus. We'll share that with you, Chairman Hazelwood, afterwards. But it shows that for all of our universities, but two, there's above 95% occupancy rate. Most of them are at 100% occupancy rate of the beds. So we'll share that out with you after this.
Okay, thank you for that information and for being here. And I want to echo Chair Lady Hazelwood's sentiments that I think this committee is anxious to take a second look at this part of the budget and see if we can address some of these needs. Thank you all.
Next on the list, Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see each one of y'all. The tuition across most of the land grant institutions and UT remain flat for fiscal year 22 to 23. Can y'all kind of speak to your plans for tuition and fees for fiscal 23, 24 and projections for 24, 25?
Stephen, you want to make?
I'll take the first part about our 23-24, where we are right now, sir, Representative Faison, is that we set a 0 to 3% binding range this past year for tuition, and our institutions fell within that. Our guiding range for next year, for fiscal year 25, that our commission set back in November, was a 0 to 4% for tuition and fees. And that number is for in-state undergraduate students specifically. That's the control that we have at our commission.
And for the university, I'll say that our advisory boards are making recommendations to us later, so I don't want to get ahead of them and presuppose, but like all of us, we're working very hard to keep our tuition down, to make sure that our tuition is very affordable.
Chairman Faison. Leader Labyrinth.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for all my colleagues as we dive deep into this, which is a significant portion of our budget. Thank you for all the work that you all do. I appreciate that, but I just want to kind of just say this for all of us to consider over the next few months. I mean, what we have before us is a proposed budget. That's why we have these budget hearings. That's why we look at all this. I'm sure there will be plenty of areas that we can cut and plenty of areas that we can expand. So I think you've given us a lot to think about today on ways that we can better invest in some of your opportunities to ensure the future of Tennessee is bright. But just wanted to go ahead and say, I mean, it's a proposed budget. So, I mean, if there are ideas on ways we can move things around, then that's both our purview and our responsibility. So thank y'all for being here today.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank all of you for being here today. I think we've all got a good snapshot of how critical our work is and you all's, and how important it is that we all work to continue to move things forward. In fact, I was sitting here thinking, and I'll be very brief, that if you've done as well with the budget you've had, just think about what would happen if we would step up to the plate and do better. So we're looking forward to that. And to keep from being redundant, Chancellor Tiding, you've answered part of this question in terms of completion date at the TCAT. How many employees are you going to have at the Blue Oval TCAT starting off?
How many employees?
Yes,
How
ma'am.
many students do we plan to have
Well, no,
enrolled
how
to
many
begin with?
employees will be there? And then, of course, I'd like to know about the student enrollment as well.
Yes, sir. the students that come in to begin with will not be employed. They'll be potential employees for Ford and SK that will be training there.
Director Tidings, I think he might mean the staffing. Staffing for the TCAT.
The staffing for
yes.
the, oh, the
I'm
staffing
sorry.
for the TCAT. For Blue Oval City, we hope to have right around 35 to begin with in staffing, and that will continue to grow as we continue to add new individuals to the campus area. We also will be working with Ford. Some of their employees will be staffing some of those programs out, as will SK. They will actually be some of the instructors there.
Has the enrollment already begun?
No, sir, not on the campus itself, but the surrounding TCATs are already growing in enrollment in anticipation that they'll be able to move to that TCAT when it's opened.
And from what I understand from visiting the site, that you will have replicas of what Blue Oval and Ford is expecting their employees and the knowledge to be able to produce their products.
Absolutely. It will look exactly like the equipment that they will be using in the plant.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, and I appreciate all that you all are doing. Thank you.
Chairman Hicks of Washington.
Thank you, Chair Lady, and thank all y'all for being here today. Chancellor Tidings, when you was talking about dual enrollment being up 105%, I think Lou and I was sort of smiling, but deep down I was tearing up because that's a huge number and something that you've worked hard on, and thank you for that. Thanks to everybody that works hard on that. It's there's nothing. It's an important job that we have to make sure that students are going on a path when they leave high school. I think that's extremely important, and workforce in Tennessee. We neglected that for a few years, and now we're getting back on track. So I thank you for that. In that space, the community colleges has decreased. It says that it's decreased about 21,000 since 2021, and the TCAT has increased about 5,000. So I'm going to use the analogy the other day that Chair Lady Hazelwood used. TCATs and for all the replacements has received a buttload of money over the last little bit. You used that. Thank you. Yes.
Chairman Hicks, if I did, it was I think that was boatload. Yes.
Oh, boatload. Now we're good.
We'll have your hearing aids checked.
Now that we've cleared that up.
Madam Chair, I'd like to
What do you think back there, Chairman Hicks?
I'd like the record to reflect that was Hicks of Washington that said that, not of Hawkins.
So noted.
My wife says that my hearing's going, so it may be. So, boatload, okay. Boat, yeah, I got it. What is the current student capacity across all TCATs? And what will the capacity be once all these projects are completed?
Yes, sir. And I do not have those exact figures with me, but can get those to you. I'm looking at my staff to see if they have the exact figure already on. They do not. We will get those numbers to you, but it is a significant increase. I want to say right now that I believe it is about 3,000 more additional students per term that we can add once all of the buildings are up and running, but I will get that accurate number for you.
Okay, and in the middle of that, just sort of, we need to know, I need to know the current enrollment at the TCATs across the statewide. So that would be good. And what trends exist in higher education that are making less people choose community colleges?
Community colleges took a bigger hit during COVID than our technical colleges did. And again, that was nationwide. I don't really know completely why, other than people were not going to work, nor were they going to college during that time. We've worked really hard, and this past year and this coming year, we are up in enrollment in the community colleges. We are building that back up, but COVID really is the deciding factor where the community colleges took a bigger hit. One of the rationales or reasoning that has been shared is that many of those individuals just did not feel like they could commit to 2 years. They were committing to a short-term certificate at our technical colleges, but 2 years just seemed overwhelming. So we've been working very diligently to get that enrollment back up, but that was a nationwide trend, again, to do with COVID. It has hurt us in the funding formula. Many of our community colleges took a downturn that never had before in the funding formula. And so we are again working very, very diligently to make sure that we are building their numbers back up.
Thank you for that answer. And thank you, Chair Lady.
And now Chairman Hicks of Hawkins will ask you to elevate the conversation, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And certainly good to see everyone here this morning. And I know we've mentioned several of the LGIs, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention an LGI that's near and dear to my heart. Of course, I'm a graduate of East Tennessee State University, and they are well represented here this morning. And I do want to bring to your attention, if they'll just raise their hand back there, Dr. Kimberly McCorkle, Provost at ETSU, as well as CFO Christy Graham, and of course, everyone knows Bridget Baird back there. So we're glad to have you all here this morning. As I was looking through the questionnaire that was submitted to the committee, one of the things that caught my attention was the loan forgiveness programs. And of course, two professions that I think that we're struggling to fill these positions across the state are those of nurses and teachers. And so as I looked at these loan forgiveness programs and the state funding that was appropriated just for fiscal year 24, I was surprised that those numbers weren't larger because of the need that we have across the state for, again, our teachers and nurses. So is the state doing enough right now to try to make sure that we are doing everything we can to make sure that pipeline is robust and that pipeline is really getting to the areas that where we really need them, such as rural communities in Hancock County, and Hawkins and Claiborne County, where I represent, because our hospitals are struggling to fill positions when it comes to nurses, and again, our school systems, our LEAs are struggling to find teachers. So is there anything in your all's opinion can be done more to kind of further again and help this really void that we have, and especially, like I said, in our rural communities? Thank you.
I'll take that first, and I'll be brief and ask the institutions to weigh in, representatives to weigh in. Both on nursing and teaching, I know Chancellor Tidings already talked about nursing from the Rural Health Task Force, and she can speak a lot more to that than I can. However, from my position at THEC, working hand in hand with the State Board of Education, I'll be at their board meeting tomorrow on theirs in the Department of Education for specifically the teachers and what we can do better for that. That's on my near-term projects with regards to teaching, and then also leading into the Department of Health with regards to nursing, and then what we can do with this Rural Health Task Force grant that we are receiving for it. But I'm going to turn to my colleagues here who are seeing we have demand, we have supply. What can we be doing differently? Chancellor Tidings?
And I think, again, the rural healthcare is one of the challenges that we're going to have to try and get the nurses into that field. We've seen that that's a real issue, and that we've got to work together with all of the healthcare entities within the area to try and shore that up. So this is going to be very helpful for us, that pathway will be able to be established for students as they come in.
So are the loan forgiveness programs, are they effective? I mean, because with the numbers that I'm seeing, either they're not very effective or they're not being utilized.
And
so
we do not have the loan forgiveness programs. That would be at the universities.
Okay.
This is just anecdotal, and I could probably get you better information. The nursing issue and the teacher issue are really two different kinds of problems with different limiting factors that have to be considered. Nurses fundamentally and most medical professionals actually tend to work in areas where they are educated. So the proximity of the institution to the area where you're trying to get that workforce becomes very important. The limiting factor on nursing is fundamentally clinical sites for training That's probably the biggest limitation that we face, and availability of qualified faculty. Those two things are the big limitation in that regard. In terms of teaching, I hate to say it, but I think as collectively we've done so much to discourage people from going into teaching that it's not as an attractive career option as it once was. And so, I think the loan forgiveness programs are fantastic. I think they're necessary, but they're not sufficient. They're not going to make the difference. It's very important to have them, but there's more that has to be done in order to ultimately address the need that you're talking about.
And I'll just add that the loan forgiveness programs aren't actually housed at the universities. They're, I think, either at FNA or at TX. So we're not directly involved in those. However, I will say, I think it's a great question. I think the short answer is we're not doing enough. And I think I've talked to maybe several in this room about an idea of a rural professionals forgiveness program of some sort. And I would add in there, not just teachers and nurses, but also dentists and veterinarians. So those are four key high felt needs we have in our rural communities. And a program, maybe here's a scenario where if you may have an agreement where the state loans the money for their tuition and fees and cost of living through graduation. On graduation, either they pay the loan back or they agree to serve in a rural community that someone designates it's a high need at that time. And after 5 years, then the loan is forgiven. So you're allowed to, you're able to direct those needed professionals to the places that are in most need at that time. The worst case scenario is they're in that community for 5 years. They're in Hancock County for 5 years providing dentistry or veterinary care or nursing, but the hope would be that they go to Hancock County and fall in love with the community or somebody and they stay there. But if worst case scenario, you've got somebody there for 5 years. But I'd highly encourage someone to look at some scenario or some program like that.
And I guess as I finish up, and I understand, where these programs are housed, and I get that. I guess when I wasn't pointing the finger at any particular institution of whether or not they're being utilized, I guess my question is, and my fear is that we've got a real shortage and a real problem. And talking about Hancock County, and I know that's a place that President Boyd knows very well, and he's a, my goodness, they think the world of you up there for all the things that you have done when you were in your prior role. But there is a real urgent need up there for teachers and for nurses. And I'm just pointing them out as a rural community. And so I would challenge you all to help us find out what are other ways that we can, that we can get some of the folks in these professions and what other, and if it's not a loan forgiveness, what ways can we, get these folks in? And I agree, if we can have them trained, they're more likely to stay in these areas. And so I know that's certainly a huge part of it, but what other ways, can we look at trying to, again, entice those high school students to go into these roles? Because I'm telling you, we just have a really, really bad shortage. And so thank you very much. Thank you all for being here.
And I think to add to that, I would concur with everything that Chairman Hicks has said. And, we're not experts in this area. We see a need, but I think we would rely on you all for suggestions of how to meet that need. We have a loan forgiveness program. That's great, but maybe we're not doing what we need to do to make sure it's implemented well or that it's marketed well or whatever. So I think those are the things that we would value input from you all back and suggestions about how to make that program or some other better program, not only fund it, but actually have it working. Leader Camper, you're next on my list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here. President Boyd, I really appreciated your myth busting.
I appreciate your helping us continue to bust them.
Yeah, I appreciated hearing that and having a deeper understanding of the impact of saying those things and what it could have. So look forward to helping you spread the word on that. Chancellor Tidings, I was just really intrigued by your innovation, your initiatives that you've done. I'd like to hear more about the Reimagine College community college experience. I love the diagram you gave, even though it was, like you said, hard to read. But I really love that because you're ahead of schedule. It gives us insight to what you're doing, the plan, dates. Thanks for sharing that with us. I know you probably do it all the time, but it was good to share with us so that we could kind of, see where the money is going, tracking. You're ahead of schedule. I was really intrigued by that. So I appreciate you sharing that and all of your insights and how you're trying to move us forward. Uh, you know, for a long time, we did not invest in TCATs. And so I'm so glad that, over the past several years, we've been doing that. And now we're able to see the impact that that's having on Tennessee. Uh, on the dual enrollment increase, could you talk about what you would attribute that great increase to? I think we're all excited about it and happy for it, but it's some things that you've done in marketing, or how did we get to this, increase in dual enrollment? I appreciate understanding a little bit more about that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your kind words and for that question. A lot of the dual enrollment, I do think, can be attributed to the fact that you have funded that at such a great level. Every time you put more money in that, we go out and we get more people to take advantage of it. So that has helped greatly to feed that pipeline. We helped change the age when students could begin enrolling in dual enrollment. We're now reaching down into the 9th grade to get students enrolled earlier into dual enrollment. And our colleges, each and every one of our presidents, this is a mission for them. It is a question that I ask them during their evaluation. What are you doing? How are you working with your superintendents? How are you working with the directors of schools? How often are you going out and having those discussions with them? I also would like to think that our Tammy and Tommy TCAT series has been most helpful in getting people engaged into the technical college arena. We've got the coloring book series, and we have the hard book where it talks about the different careers, and we have the life-size figures that our campuses borrow from the system office, and they take them into the elementary schools, and they talk about Tommy and Tammy. Those Tommy and Tammy figures are riding in every Christmas parade across the state of Tennessee.
That's
So
great.
it's been a lot of marketing to get people interested and to see the value of that. And again, at the end of the day, I believe it's because they have jobs. When people see that this career takes them immediately to a job, and they can begin work and they can continue college at the same time because we've established those pathways. So it's helping everybody across the state to see the value of higher education and what they can do.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that. I felt we was doing a great job in marketing, and we spent a lot of money trying to get the word out. So I appreciate hearing the return on that.
And let me just say quickly, we
Yes,
can
ma'am.
always use more.
Just
This is-
like those buildings, so we can use more. Lastly, could you talk more about your Reimagine Community College?
Absolutely. One of the things that I have been really excited about is sort of flipping the paradigm for when students enter college. And I know that most of you, when you entered, it was like me. You were signed up for an English, math, and a psychology class in the very beginning. That they had a core competencies that you took the first term that you were there. And so that first term, we all kind of scratched our head and going, what does this have to do with what I want to be when I grow up? So what we've done is sort of flip that paradigm. And when students enter, we now have them entering into the program of study right away. They're getting their hands into the program that they came to our colleges to find out about. If they want to go into nursing, they're starting into some pre-nursing programs. If they're wanting to go into mechanical engineering, they're starting getting their hands on the equipment. We find that helps the students with retention. It helps them understand the value of why am I doing this? What does that math class have to do with what I'm wanting to be when I finish my college degree? So our colleges are doing a great job reversing or revising the curriculum. They're also showing that we've got those stackable credentials now, so that if a student does stop out because life got in the way in that first, second, or third term, they're going to be eligible for a credential, something that would actually help them go to work. They will not have completed an entire program, but they've got a piece of that program that is something that will put them in the job market. And then with our competency-based education program that we talked about putting in, that many of our colleges have adopted, and we will have 6 colleges beginning in the fall of 24 that will have full programs that are competency-based. That means that if you've already got life experiences in a program of study, when you come to us, we're not going to ask you to repeat what you already know how to do. We're going to evaluate what you know how to do, and we're going to give you the credit for what you already know how to do, and you may jump up and then be able to go further in that program of study. So we, again, are trying to be very student-centric, understanding where they are and taking them further than they ever thought they could go.
Leader Camper, we are short on time, so if you could wrap it up.
I'm wrapping it up, Madam Chair. Thank you for that. And I really love this program warranty. That was very innovative.
Well, if we can't stand behind what we do, we shouldn't be doing it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chancellor Tight.
Leader Cochran.
Thank you, Chair Lady. And my question is really quick and really just to highlight something I think that maybe is easily glossed over. And President Boyd, it's for you. We talked about the chemistry building earlier. Representative Zachary touched on that as well. How many students in the Tennessee system does that chemistry building serve every year?
Okay, so at the UT Knoxville campus,
Yes.
8,000 students a year go through the chemistry building, which is roughly a third of all of our undergraduates. And I did have the question not too long ago from someone that said, well, how many chemistry majors do we need? Well, maybe not that many chemistry majors, but if you're yes, and your successor at UT Chattanooga as well, but if you're getting a degree in animal science, pre-medicine, material science, it's a core skill class that everybody needs to take, or a third of our students have to take. So it's important.
And just I think just to add a little bit of comparison to that, and it's just important. So 8,000 students a year, just to give you the scope of that, the entire UT Chattanooga campus is 9,884 students. The entire UT Martin campus is 6,705 students. Austin P, 10,344 students. Just that one building is comparable to some of our largest, some of our larger universities in the state. And I think it's easy to look over that, about how many students in the state of Tennessee use that one building and just the importance of that. I just wanted to highlight that very quickly. Thanks for taking us through it.
Thank you.
Representative Sparks.
Real quick, I just want to echo what President Boyd said. We're very blessed to live in this great state. I want to publicly thank the late Charles Sargent, John Bragg, who served way before many of us, Chairman Williams and Hazelwood and Hicks and Baum. The media probably isn't going to report this. It doesn't make for good narrative, I guess, but we've had such record investment in our community on MTSU, the science building, the new applied engineering building, the new concrete building, Motlow expansion, third building, $40 million. My late mentor, Bob Spivey, always said he was going to bring a college to Smyrna, and I never believed him. He made it all happen. He was a visionary, much like you, President Boyd. But we do have our challenges. But one of the challenges I want to bring up is the challenge of mental health within our students and across the state. The importance of mentoring Tennessee achieves. If you can expand on that. And before you do, I just want to thank you for meeting with Aaron Carter, Smyrna High football standout, chose UT over Alabama, over Ohio State, over LSU, but he chose UT. And what I thought was neat of what he said in the paper, he said the reason he chose UT was, he said, it was the people that were around him, the relationships I could build. And being an in-state home kid were a lot of advantages that you took the time out to meet with him. Impressive young man, 3.92 GPA, bench press, he claims, a 420. I kind of doubt it, but he says 420. But just a polite young man, but leveraging Tennessee Achieves and mentoring and successful students like Aaron Carter that could help with incoming freshmen, and mental health. Can you expand on that, President Boyd?
You give me a lot to expand on, but I think I'm just going to pick one thing, and that's around the mental health of our students. It's critically important, and we've been playing catch up for years. It seems like the more we invest, the situations continue to outgrow our ability to catch up. One of the things we're doing now as a system is we just hired our first ever chief wellness officer that's focusing on mental health across the system to coordinate our efforts. We were just at a briefing with her last week in which she emphasized that you can't counsel your way out of the mental health issue. We've got to get ahead of the curve and help provide support and services before there's a critical need. So that's an area which I'm sure my colleagues as well are trying to do or to get ahead of, but it's of critical importance.
Yeah, let me just give you one quick data point on that. 10 years ago, about 2% of our students at Tennessee Tech sought counseling services. Today, it's 10%. So that's, and I'm sure that's reflected on all of our campuses. So it's no matter how much resources we put into it, there's more needed.
Yes. For the record, the 988 crisis number really should be out there at all the TCATs, colleges across state. I want to thank Dr. McPhee. We had an incident on campus a few months ago. He addressed it in a very compassionate way that was very welcoming to the students. So thank you, Dr. McPhee. Thank you, President Boyd.
Thank you.
All right, well, I thank you, all of our presenters, Director Gentile, Dr. Tidings, President Boyd, President Odom, for being here today. You've certainly given us a lot to think about. I think we're going to have a lot of ongoing discussions about both capital needs and maintenance requirements. One of the things that I'd like for challenge you all to do is to take a look at your funding buckets. I know we have plant funds. Each entity has those funds available. There's some R&R funds that are available for, more minor kind of maintenance issues. But I would challenge you all to help us take a look at those dollars, see how we might use those or leverage those with other funding that we might be able to provide to address not only, I think this was Dr. Adams' point, not only to just keep level, but to try and get ahead of some of these maintenance issues before they just become more costly over time. So again, I think this committee would like to work with you all, not only in what we can do from our budget perspective, but what you all might be able to do to address that from within your own resources. So we look forward to having more discussions on those lines. We have kept you over. I apologize for that, but there's always a lot of interest. Obviously, what you all do for the state and for our citizens, students, future students is critical to our health, economically and mentally and every other way. So thank you for being here with us today. Thank you for providing the information for those things that have been requested that you weren't able to, just have those numbers off the top of your head. Again, if you'll just get that to my office, we'll share it with the committee as a whole. With that, we are back in session, and that does complete our calendar for today. Budget hearings will resume Tuesday. We're off on Monday, so take a well-deserved break, but budget hearings will resume Tuesday afternoon at 3 o'clock. Are there any other items of business need to come before the body? Representative Love.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to announce that even though today is Valentine's Day, it is also the birthday of Richard Allen, who was the founder of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. He was born on February the 14th, and in 1787 started the AME Church, of which I'm a member. So I just want to recognize that as well. Thank you.
Well, happy birthday. And I thought you were going to tell us that Valentine's or not, there was always love in the house. But with that, Leader Camp.
Well, with that, my brother's birthday is today. He's a Valentine baby. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Happy birthday to all those. I have a cousin whose birthday today. We won't go, it's all those. Yeah. With that, we are adjourned.